This story happened to a man who went on a trip to the Smoky Mountains with his fiancée. They drove up a mountain at midnight to see the stars. When they got out of the car, the man felt something was wrong. The wind was loud and they couldn't see any stars. The man then walked away from the car to pee. While doing his business, he felt scared and alone until he saw something really weird. It was big like a person, but then it got smaller and changed shape into a wild dog. It jumped over a rail. With so much fear, he quickly ran back to his car while feeling nervous. They drove away fast while his fiancée didn't have any idea what was going on, but the man knew very well that something was in the woods with them that night. This story happened to a woman who visited the Old Harrington Hospital with her boyfriend in January 2013. The hospital was abandoned and had a bad history. Before they went, her boyfriend told her about the strange experience he had there a few years ago. He and his friends got lost in the woods and had to search for their car keys. They eventually found them, but it was a weird experience. When the woman and her boyfriend arrived at the hospital, they found out that it had been abandoned. They were disappointed, but they decided to explore the area anyway. As they were walking, they heard a strange jingling sound coming from the keys attached to her boyfriend's backpack. They didn't know what was causing it, but it stopped when her boyfriend put the keys in his pocket. Later, they found a car key on the trail. It was the woman's key, but she didn't know how it got there because she had seen her boyfriend put her keys in his pocket. The woman was wondering and was a little scared, but the woman felt even more scared when her boyfriend told her something. "You know, this is the same spot where my friend found his keys the last time I visited here." This story happened years ago to a father whose daughter was a college student at Ohio University. One night, he got a call from her at 2 a.m. She was crying and scared. She told him that strange things had been happening in her dorm room. She heard loud noises like something falling, and she heard someone breathing heavily near her bed. "Dad, I'm so scared," she said, her voice shaking. "I felt someone touch me while I was lying in bed. I don't know what to do." Her father tried to calm her down and told her to tell the presence to leave her alone. "Just say go away and mean it," he said. But she was still scared and didn't know what to do next. As the father listened to his daughter's terrified voice, he felt worried and scared for her safety. He wanted to help her, but he didn't know what to do either. Good thing her daughter was now safe and had left that dorm a long time already. This story happened years ago to a college student who lived in a cheap apartment with 2 roommates. The apartment was old, but they did in line because the rent was low. However, strange things started to happen. One night, the student was studying for an exam when he heard his roommates come home with friends. They were being loud downstairs, so the student texted them to lower their voices. But then they replied that they weren't even home, which was weird because the student had just heard them. The student's roommates had proved that they weren't really home that night. They were actually at a friend's house, studying for their own exams. The student was alone in the apartment, and the voices he heard were not his roommates or their friends. So, who or what was making all that noise? The student was left with a creepy feeling, wondering if he was really alone in the apartment. As it turned out, he wasn't the only one who had experienced weird things in that apartment. At least 8 people had similar encounters, and it seemed like the apartment had been haunted for a long time. This story happened to a college student who shared a dorm room with her best friend, Emily, during their freshman years in 2015. At first, everything seemed normal, but then strange things started to happen. They would come home to find their room messy, with all the drawers and doors open. It was as if someone had been there, but they knew they were all alone. As time went on, the strange things continued. They would hear noises like someone was walking around, or like their laundry baskets were being moved. One night, the student even heard a faint voice say "bless you" after she sneezed while she was all alone. She was shocked and didn't know what to do. She and Emily were scared, but they didn't know what was happening or who was causing it. They tried to ignore it, but strange events kept happening. Eventually, they decided to tell their dorm advisor about what was going on, and that's when they found out about the truth. The room was haunted by a ghost of a little girl named Sarah. They weren't told about the identity or background story of Sarah, and all they knew was that they were living with a ghost in that dormitory. This story happened years ago to a university student who liked to study in the quiet and old section of the library back in 2019. One night, he was studying in a small room in the basement when he heard a loud noise. It sounded like a door had opened and closed. The night guard was sitting nearby and looked surprised. He got up to check what happened but couldn't find anyone. The student went back to studying, but then something strange happened. A woman's voice yelled, "It's very late," from right behind him. But when he turned around, there was no one there. He quickly packed up his things and left the room. When he ran into the guard again, the guard asked if he was okay. The student said yes, but the guard just smiled and said, "Maggie must have scared you." The student was confused, but the guard explained that Maggie was the librarian who used to work at the university back in the 1950s, but died of an accident outside the university. But people said she still haunted the library. This story happened years ago to a man in his home. He was sitting in the dark, sipping his coffee and checking his email when he heard a strange noise coming from the basement. The voice said, "Hello? Is anyone there? I need help." At first, he thought he didn't hear it right and that he was just imagining things. But then, he heard it again. A woman's voice calling out for help. The man was shocked and wondered who could be making the noise. He looked around, but his grandma and sister were still asleep. Then, that's when he noticed his dog staring at the basement door, as if they had heard the voice too. The man was scared, so he did the only thing that he could think of. He barricaded the basement door and locked himself in his room. This story happened years ago to a college student at her dormitory that used to be an old mansion. Everything seemed normal until she started to notice strange things happening. She would find feathers in her stuff and would hear footsteps outside her room at exactly 2 a.m. every night. She didn't know who or what was making the noise. One night, she stayed awake to see if she could catch the person making the noises, but instead, she just felt even more scared. The door decorations fell off, like someone had moved them. As time went on, more weird things happened. Doors would open and close by themselves. She started to feel like she wasn't alone in the dorm. She tried to make peace with whatever was happening. She asked it to leave her alone that night, but then something strange happened while she was sick in bed. Her stuff started to get sorted and cleaned up. It was like someone was trying to help her. She didn't know what to think. She was scared, but also a little happy. Years later, she found out that a little boy had died in the house a long time ago. She likes to think that his spirit was trying to help her. She feels a little better knowing that. She still thinks about what happened, but she's not as scared anymore. This story happened to a 13-year-old boy during an English camp in 2018. He was staying in the dorm room with 3 other roommates, and on the last day of the camp, they decided to wake up early to watch the sunrise. After watching the sunrise, they walked around the area outside of their dorm rooms, and that's when he noticed something weird. A pale white faceless figure standing by the window of his dorm room, staring at them. He called his friends to confirm, and they all saw the figure, but when they went back to the room, there was no one there, and the curtains were closed, which didn't match what they saw earlier. They questioned their roommate, but she swore she didn't see anyone, and the only explanation that they could think of was that it was a ghost. What's even creepier is that he discovered that his brother, who attended the same camp 3 years earlier, saw the exact same figure in the same dorm room. They didn't have any idea about the history of the room, but they all knew that it was hiding a dark story.